Did you know that in 15 seconds, World War III could have started? Not planned, not declared, just started. Because a computer screen in Moscow lit up red with one word, launch. There is a man who saved the world in 1983. He never fired a weapon. He never rescued anyone with his own hands. He saved the world by doing nothing, by refusing to press a button. And for the next 13 years, almost no one on Earth knew his name. The strangest part? His own military didn't thank him. They quietly punished him for it. His name was Stanislav Petrov. In September 1983, he was 44 years old, a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces. He was not a soldier in the traditional sense. He was an engineer, one of the men who had helped write the code for the Soviet Union's newest early warning system. That system was called OKO, the Russian word for eye. Its job was simple: watch American missile fields from space and scream the moment anything launched. Petrov understood OKO better than almost anyone alive. He knew exactly what it could see. He also knew exactly how it could fail. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand the world outside the bunker. 3 weeks earlier, Soviet fighter jets had shot down a civilian airliner, Korean Airlines Flight 007, killing all 269 people aboard, including a sitting U.S. congressman. The world was furious. Washington was furious. Moscow's leadership, aging, paranoid, convinced the West was preparing a first strike, was bracing for retaliation. This was not a calm moment in history. This was one of the most dangerous weeks of the entire Cold War, and Stanislav Petrov was about to walk into the middle of it. September 26, 1983. Just after midnight, Petrov took his seat at the command center of Serpukhov 15, a secret bunker outside Moscow. It was a quiet shift, routine. The kind of night where nothing is supposed to happen. Then the alarm went off. Not a soft alert, a full siren, and one word lit up, in red across the main screen, LL1CH. The system reported a single intercontinental ballistic missile fired from a base in the United States, heading towards Soviet territory. For 15 seconds, Petrov said later, he simply sat there in shock. 15 seconds where the entire fate of the planet quietly hung in the air. Then his training took over. His job, his only job, was to confirm the alert and pass it up the chain of command. From there, the decision would belong to men far above his rank, men who, in the political climate of that week, were primed to believe the worst. But then the second missile appeared, then a third, a fourth, a fifth, 5 missiles now, according to the system. Confidence level highest. The computer was telling him, with total certainty, that the United States had just launched a nuclear first strike. The protocol was unambiguous. Report immediately. Petrov had, by most estimates, less than 15 minutes before Soviet leadership would need to decide whether to launch a retaliatory strike of their own. And here is where Stanislav Petrov did something almost no one in his position would have dared to do. He looked at the data, and he did not believe it. His reasoning was simple, and it came from the part of him that had built the system, not the part that was told to trust it blindly. A real American first strike, he reasoned, would not come as 5 missiles. It would come as hundreds, an overwhelming wave meant to guarantee total destruction. 5 missiles made no strategic sense. He also had ground-based radar available to him, a separate system, and it showed nothing at all. No corroborating evidence. No visual confirmation through available tracking. Just the one satellite system screaming with total confidence at the worst possible moment in the Cold War to be wrong. Petrov made his decision. He picked up the phone to his superiors and reported the alert as a system malfunction, a false alarm. He said this without being certain. He said this understanding that if he was wrong, he would be one of the last people on Earth to know that Moscow had already been destroyed. He said this anyway. Then he waited. Every second that passed without impact was a second that supported his judgment. Every second was also a second where, if he was wrong, it was already too late to matter. No warheads fell. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. The world did not end. The investigation that followed found exactly what Petrov suspected. The OKO satellites had mistaken sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds for the engine flare of intercontinental missiles. A rare, specific alignment of sun-satellite orbit and atmosphere had created a false signal, so convincing that a machine built specifically to detect this exact threat could not tell the difference. Stanislav Petrov could. You might expect the story to end with Petrov being celebrated as a hero. It does not. The The Soviet military, embarrassed by the failure of a system it had spent years and enormous resources building, did not want the story told at all. Petrov was quietly reprimanded, not for the decision that may have prevented nuclear war, but for the paperwork he failed to properly complete during the incident because he had spent that time on the phone making the call that actually mattered. There was no medal, no announcement, no public acknowledgement of any kind. The entire incident was classified. Petrov returned to ordinary life, still bound by Soviet military secrecy, forbidden from ever discussing what had happened that night. For 13 years, he told almost no one. Not because he wanted to keep the secret, because he was ordered to. The story only came out in the 1990s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when a retired general who had worked alongside Petrov began speaking publicly about the classified incidents of the Cold War. When journalists eventually found Petrov, he was living quietly, modestly, largely forgotten by the country he had potentially saved. He was asked many times over the following years if he considered himself a hero. He consistently said no. He said he had simply been the right man, in the right chair at the right moment, doing the job he was trained to do. He said the credit, if there was credit to give, belonged partly to luck, that on that particular night, it happened to be him on duty and not someone more willing to blindly trust the machine. He never fully escaped the weight of what almost happened. In later interviews, he described the 15 seconds of the alarm as the longest of his life, seconds where he understood, more clearly than almost any human being in history has ever understood, exactly how close the entire species had come to erasing itself over a glitch in a satellite. Stanislav Petrov died in 2017 at the age of 77, largely outside public attention once again. By then, the story had spread, documentaries, awards from international peace organizations, a title the press had given him, the man who saved the world. He accepted the recognition with the same quiet discomfort he had shown from the beginning. Never framed what he did as courage in the traditional sense. He framed it as thinking clearly for 15 seconds, when almost everyone else in his position would have simply followed the protocol in front of them. There is something worth sitting with in this story that most retellings skip past. Petrov was not rewarded for saving the world. He was quietly punished for it. The system that failed was never the machine alone, it was also the culture around the machine, a culture that valued speed and obedience over the 15 seconds it takes a person to think. The most dangerous moment of the entire Cold War was not a decision to attack. It was a decision made by one tired man in a bunker at midnight to simply wait one moment longer before believing what he was told. There is a piece of context that makes Petrov's 15 seconds even more remarkable. Just 11 days after this incident, NATO began a massive military exercise called Able Archer 83, a simulated nuclear command and control drill designed to test how NATO forces would respond in a real crisis. Soviet intelligence, already primed for paranoia by weeks of escalating tension, watched Able Archer unfold and genuinely could not be certain it was only an exercise. Some historians consider that week, sandwiched around Petrov's decision to be the closest the world came to accidental nuclear war during the entire Cold War. Petrov's 15 seconds sat directly inside the most volatile stretch of the entire nuclear age. Had he passed the alert up the chain during that specific window, the response above him may well have assumed the worst was finally arriving. It's worth understanding what the alternative would have actually looked like. Soviet nuclear doctrine at the time operated under a principle of launch on warning. The idea that a retaliatory strike needed to be authorized before enemy missiles actually landed, because waiting for confirmed impact might mean waiting until Moscow's own command structure was destroyed. This meant the men above Petrov were not designed to hesitate. They were designed to trust the system and act within minutes. Petrov was, in a very real sense, the only manual override in an otherwise automated countdown to catastrophe. Away from the bunker, Petrov's life was unremarkable in almost every way. He was married to Raisa, and they had 2 children, a son and a daughter. He continued his military career for another year after the incident before retiring, still bound to silence about what had actually happened during his shift that September night. His wife died of cancer in 1997, and by the time journalists eventually located him in the late 1990s, he was living a quiet, modest life outside Moscow, a pensioner, largely unknown, in a small apartment that gave no indication that its occupant had once held the fate of billions in his hands for a quarter of an hour. When his story finally reached the wider world, it did not travel through official channels. It traveled through Yuri Votintsev, a retired general who had once commanded Soviet missile defense forces and who began, cautiously, to speak about previously classified Cold War incidents after the Soviet collapse. Votintsev's account named Petrov specifically, and from there journalists tracked him down. Petrov, for his part, seemed almost bewildered by the sudden attention. He gave interviews reluctantly, always circling back to the same point. He had simply done his job, and the job had simply happened to matter more than most jobs ever do. In the years after his story became public, Petrov received a strange kind of recognition, awards from organizations most people had never heard of, presented by people who understood exactly what his 15 seconds had actually been worth. In 2006, he was honored at the United Nations in New York in a ceremony most of the world never saw. In 2013, he received the Dresden Prize in Germany, an award given for preventing armed conflict, alongside a cash prize he reportedly found almost embarrassing to accept. A documentary was made about him, titled The Man Who Saved the World, blending interviews with a partially dramatized recreation of the incident. Petrov attended screenings quietly, answered questions patiently, and consistently deflected any suggestion that he had done something extraordinary. There's a particular kind of courage this story keeps circling back to, the kind that doesn't look like courage at all in the moment. Petrov did not run into danger. He did not sacrifice his body for someone else's. He sat in a chair, looked at a screen that was telling him something urgent and false, and chose the much harder path of doubt over the much easier path of obedience. For in a system built entirely around trusting the machine and moving fast, the single most important variable in the whole event was one man's willingness to slow down. That is a strange kind of heroism to try to put into a citation or a medal. Maybe that's part of why the Soviet military never quite knew what to do with him. It's easier to reward a person for an action than for the absence of one. He died in May 2017 in Friazino, a small city outside Moscow, and for weeks almost no one outside his immediate circle knew he was gone. A family friend eventually told a journalist, and only then did obituaries begin appearing in newspapers around the world. A final irony for a man whose most important act had also gone unnoticed for over a decade. The story of September 26, 1983 is, in the end, a story about the 15 minutes between a false alarm and a decision that could not be undone. Is also a story about how history sometimes turns not on the actions of armies or leaders, but on the quiet judgment of one tired engineer sitting in a bunker, refusing to believe what he was being told at exactly the moment when believing it would have been catastrophic. If this story reached something in you, leave a comment below. Whose hidden story should we open next? Subscribe. We will see you on the next page of history.